to excuse me today. I'm blind and my allergies are acting up. Okay. First of all, these are my daughters. This is Rochelle, and this is Regina. And this was Regina's boyfriend. He was also murdered 10 months after she was murdered. I'm here today because I'm a survivor of homicide. I had two beautiful daughters, and they were murdered within 3 years of each other, 91 and 92 respectively. My oldest daughter, Regina, went to McDonald's for a meal, which she always loved to do. And the person who was riding in the back seat of her boyfriend's car was loading a gun and discharged and shot her in her back. She died instantly. It was one of those bullets they call cop killers that explodes on impact. And unfortunately, I had to identify her at the hospital. And then the nightmare continued when I had to go to Farmington and identify her again. Okay. The only way I found out that the murderous trial was going on was through a friend. He happened to be in the courtroom, and he came back and told me. And by the time I got to the court, they were already sentencing him, and I had no time to make a victim's impact statement. He got 10 years suspended after 7 and 3 years parole. My second daughter, Rochelle, was sitting on a porch on Chapel Street with some of her friends, and the person who murdered her, she had told me he never liked her, and he came up to the porch and just shot her in her head. His defense was he was high on cocaine and hallucinogens. He was on the run for 3 months, and he was caught, and the only way I found out about that was when I had to read it in the papers. No one, police never notified me or anything. I was notified when the trial began, and I was there every day. With my victim's impact statement, he received 33 years without possibility of parole. But he has since contacted me to come to the parole board to let him come out on early release. That was the first time. And the second time, he had a friend of his come to my home. I don't know how he found out where we lived because we had moved since she was murdered. She came to me with a proposal that he wanted to start a Rochelle Banks Foundation to help girls like my daughter. What he meant by that, I don't know, but it just brought the nightmare all back again. And since my kids are treated differently now, before they could go out and I wouldn't worry about them, but even now when my two oldest, my daughter and my son go out, or any of the kids go out, I'm awake or around until they come home. That's the only way I can find peace. I have to know that they're in the house and safe. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It not only affects my family, but it affects the family of the person that did the murdering too. For people who have been through what we have been through, we live a new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. The next speaker is Betty Barrett. She's a survivor of homicides member as well. Her and her husband, Bob, live in Madison, Connecticut. They're parents of 4 children, Robert, Kathleen, Jennifer, and Dawn. Since their daughter Kathleen's murder on March 7, 2006, they claim the focus of their life is learning as much as they can about how the system works and seeing justice serves. Please help me welcome Betty.
My daughter's here on this board. And while I'm really pleased to speak to everyone in this room, it would seem to me, almost seem to me, that the people that need to hear the story have left. And maybe next time they need to speak last. Okay, let me start at the beginning. My family and I are victims of homicide, and I'd like to tell you about the day that my daughter Kathleen was murdered. It was March 7th, 2006. Unlike most March days, the weather was unseasonably warm, the kind of day that makes you smile after a long winter. I had no idea as I drove to my patient's home it would be a very long time before I smiled again. I'm a social worker who makes home visits, and it's kind of ironic that that morning I was visiting a patient who was still actively grieving for her son murdered 6 years before on 9/11. She told me that she was finding it impossible to move on, impossible to live a normal life. She wept as she told me her life would never be the same again, how she's haunted by that terrible day. I told her that I couldn't even imagine losing a child. I had no idea what that would be like. I told her how sorry I was. We talked for a while. I left. On to my next patient, enjoying the beautiful sunshine. My phone rang. It was my daughter, Jen. She said, "Mom, you need to come home. There's been an accident." I said, "What do you mean an accident?" She said, "Mom, Kathy's been in an accident." I said, "All right, I'll meet you at the hospital." She said, "No, Mom, you need to come home." And the minute she said that, I knew that my daughter was dead. I drove home in shock, and I realized I never even asked her what happened. As I arrived home, nobody was there. I remember walking around aimlessly, thinking it's got to be a mistake. When my daughter Jen came running into the house and I looked at her face, I knew it was no mistake, and I knew that our lives would be forever changed. I remember falling to my knees and screaming, "No, no, no, this can't be. How can we tell her children?" Her children at the time were 6, 8, and 10. I didn't find out until later that evening while watching the news that my daughter was murdered. On that sunny Tuesday morning, someone poured a accelerant on the steps leading upstairs to where she slept. They lit a match. They walked out into the bright sunlight, leaving my daughter to die alone in the dark, a room filled with smoke. What kind of monster does that? The autopsy report states, Mrs. Hardy is a woman younger looking than her 39 years, found with her hair in a ponytail wearing Betty Boop pajamas. Her shoulders blistered, her hands burnt from trying to find her way out of the bedroom, her sooty fingerprints all over the door, a door she found too late. Her body laid half in her room and half in the hall. We were told the heat in that house was 1,500 degrees. I lay in bed at night and I picture Kathy's last moments. I replay them over and over and over. Did she cry out for her children, for me, her dad? Did she know she was taking her last breath? Was she in terrible pain? They tell me that smoke inhalation is painless. What about the seconds before she died? I'll never know. The shock of murder takes hold immediately. It's sudden, it's unexpected, and horrifying. It knocks us to our knees and leaves us baffled. It doesn't happen to us. It happens on TV. It happens in books. Not to us. Murder is an emotional roller coaster that knocks us into a world we're not familiar with, the justice system. It does not take long to find out that we're lost when it comes to knowing what victims' rights are, court proceedings, unfamiliar terms associated with trials. We joined a group called Survivors of Homicide. This group is comprised of people who have lost loved ones to homicide. Members of the group educate and walk new members through the system. They have worked long and hard on changing the laws associated with victims' rights. For this, we say thank you. The police and FBI work diligently to bring the people who killed my daughter to justice, and to them we say thank you. There are